Imagine you are a plumber, ready to take on the evil King Koopa in a fiery lake of lava. You're on a rickety bridge. He's throwing hammers, he's breathing fire, and you have jumped through all the 8 worlds and multiple levels to get to this point. Right when you're about to do it, an A button pops up. You do that, press the A button. Mario immediately does a backflip over the wall, jumps across the level, grabs a hammer, knocks all the hammers aside, and smacks Bowser into a pit of lava. He does a breakdance and saves the princess. Now, that was cool, but did you actually do any of that? Absolutely not. You pressed the button and Mario did all that. That's what's called a QTE, which is a quick time event. And those are scattered in action games nowadays, and I am calling for them to be just rid of entirely. Because video games are meant to be played, not watched like they're a movie. As Richard Rouse III, in his book Game Design Theory and Practice, says, games are distinct from other solitary experiences, such as reading a book or watching a video, since they provide players with something to interact with, an experience that reacts to them as a human would, or at least in a manner resembling a human's reaction. The players are always in control. Don't we want to be in control as much as possible in both life and in video games? Of course we do. QTEs take control away from you and make you think like you're doing a whole lot more than you actually are. Now, I'm talking about action games in general because there's games such as story games like Shenmue, Heavy Rain, and Until Dawn, which is an entirely different conversation. We're just sticking with action games. I've been making games for years, and I made both story games and action games, so I feel I know what I'm talking about with this. So, we're going to show why QTEs are such a big problem in action games, why they need to be rid of, and how they can make games better. QTEs teach the easiest thing possible you can do in games. And that takes away control from the core gameplay of the game, the thing that you need to do most often in games. QTEs just throw that aside. As the show X Credits on YouTube says in the video about balancing for skill, this is what's called a FOO strategy, or First Order Optimal Strategy. It states that players would typically use the strategy that gives the greatest amount of payout for the lowest amount of effort. Think of a real-life example. You're driving a car and you have an auto-drive function, a self-drive function. You want to use that as much as possible because that means you don't have to drive at all. But what if you're using an auto-drive and a semi is heading your way? If you didn't learn how to drive and just using auto-drive all the time, you tend to get into the scenario of bam, wheel, 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 and nobody wants that. So we don't want that in our game either. So luckily with taking these QTEs away, we'll give control way more control back to the player. And no worries, games can still be accessible and fun without QTEs. QTEs in action games are usually actions you do already, like dodging out of the way, or moving back, or jumping, or attacking. All these QTEs usually bundle them together, but you can just take them away and just use the actions that the game gives you, the core mechanics. And it gives the control way more to the players. A counter to this argument is by Polygon writer Jennifer Sherrill and her article In Defense of Quick Time Events. She states, and let's not forget that pause QTEs that can't be failed are a very valid way of making them accessible for all players. The hate for QTEs, in my opinion, is an unnecessary expression of difficulty elitism. And I agree with difficulty elitism, but my theory to help with that is changing difficulty entirely, making an easier mode. And games already do this entirely. Like Dragon Age Inquisition, they have a story mode, or Star Fox Zero Invincible mode, where it's practically impossible to lose, and that makes it so you can train for the game. So later, if you do want to increase the difficulty, you can still learn the core mechanics, and so that you don't have to rely on QTEs to when you change the difficulty. So now that I explained the QTEs, the solution to them, I'm going to give a small example. All right. So, in a game without a QTE, you'll have a scenario of like an enemy ready to attack the player. So, without the QTE, you can design a few options. You can dodge out of the way. You can move back. You can counter, like block the attack, I mean. Or you can counter the attack with like attack of your own or a magic spell. The options are endless, and it gives you training for harder scenarios instead of just regular enemy attacking you. There could be more scenarios that you're training for just by doing these core mechanics. However, if it's just a QTE that just pops up, then it does all of these things, or most of these things, and all you really know how to do is just press the A button when it pops up. You're not really training for anything. And this comes to a problem called instant gratification. It's much like if you prepare a meal, take the time and eat that meal, it's much more satisfying than just going to like a fast food restaurant and just getting a meal entirely. This phenomenon is talked about by Jim Benson in his blog Personal Kanban. Neuroscience has found that when we finish tasks, we get a dopamine rush. We actually do feel better. However, interruptions trick the brain. They can be like instant gratification that gives us little dopamine rushes. To buttress this, Austin Perlmutter, MD, says in Psychology Today in his article, Real Issues with Instant Gratification. Additionally, as we continue our quest for rewarding quick fixes, we start to experience a dopamine surge in our brain, long before we actually experience any reward, and the craving associated with dopamine release hits us early too. So now, just driving by your favorite fast food restaurant or seeing your phone nearby is enough to induce powerful cravings, making it more challenging to break an unhealthy habit. In this case, the unhealthy habit is the QTE. You're going to want to use it over and over again, and you're way less prepared to even use the normal stuff that the game wants you to use, the core mechanics. I hope I was able to show through these examples and through my speech how taking away what QTs are, the solution to replace them, and why they shouldn't be in action games generally. General. Now, what do we do? Well, if you're making a game, make sure to just not have QTEs. Just replace them with options that you already have in the game to train the players. But if you're just playing any action game, make sure to write a review. It's like, hey, in your next game, don't add these QTEs, or email the company. That's an option as well. So remember, when you don't have the eight, remember, in the game, you want to make sure you are the one that saves the princess, not the game. So you can go, woohoo!